that song a lot.
Seems Like Old Times
Uh-huh.
by Guy Lombardo.
Yep. Yeah, you'd go to a bar and there'd be just lying down, man. They were, and the girls were, all the girls were popular. You didn't have to be beautiful. Yep, there'll never be another time like that. And that's when I met your dad. He was on the prowl. Boy, everybody was so happy in those years.
Mm.
The war was over.
Did your dad come home and say the war's over or something? I mean, you probably heard it on the radio and in town and all
Let me
that.
see, how did I? Well, they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. They called it Hiroshima. Now they call it Hiroshima. Then they called it Hiroshima. Yeah, and then it wasn't long after. Well, no, the war in Europe was already over. Then they were going to, and Dad was on his way to, he had to take his physical to go to Japan. And they were going to be going to Japan then for an invasion. And then they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and the war ended. But then they didn't, and then they had been dropping leaflets in Japan to surrender, and they didn't do it. And so then they decided to drop the bomb, and they did, and they still didn't surrender. So how many days later did they go to Nagasaki with the second
It
bomb?
was not long after at all.
Shortly after that, and then they surrendered.
Oh, the destruction.
Over Europe, it ended in May. It was May 9th, I think. The war ended then. Isn't that weird? I don't remember how we found out. We found out, but then we had to go into, they all went uptown after Japan surrendered. Everybody was uptown in Pontiac, milling around, and I decided I'd go up and see what was going on, and I didn't see anything exciting up there, so I got in the car and went home.
You think they'd be celebrating?
Yeah, you sure would. But there were a lot of people up there, but there were no bands or anything, or there was nothing. Just people up down, just being happy.
Mm-hmm.
So I went home. Not see anybody I knew.
What was it like when your brothers came home?
Ken came home first. He came home. He never got home till Christmas. In fact, it was Christmas Day, and it had snowed, and then we had snow. And I was up yet. I was the only one up. And the front door, somebody knocked. So I went to the front door to see who it was, and nobody was there. And I opened the door and looked, and there were footprints on the steps. You know how our house was.
Mm-hmm.
And then I turned around and went back, and then the back door opened up, and I went over to see who was coming in. And there he was, him and a friend from Ancona, and it was Ken. He never told us he was coming home. So I ran back, and my mother and dad were in bed. And I hollered up at him. I said, "Ken's here. Ken's home." And the way they come jumping down of bed, and my dad said, "Where in the hell you been?" And he didn't know what else. He didn't know what else to say, I guess. So I asked him where he'd been. "Where in the hell you been?"
Yeah, I mean, it ended
Jim
in.
didn't come home until he came home after that.
They got to process everybody. It's what it is, you know.
Well, let's see, he didn't come home, that was in 45. And Jim didn't come home until after that. It was like, I can't remember when it, but I was working uptown at Reese's, I remember that. And the day that Jim came home, my dad said, I'm going to meet that Greyhound bus because Jim's going to be on it. And Jim didn't know he was going to, that our dad was going to meet him. And I don't know how he knew that Jim would be on that bus. But he was there anyway. When Jim got off the bus, my dad was there. And I was working at Reese's Dry Cleaners. And they came in, my dad and my brother.
How long had it been since you'd seen Jim?
About 3 years. And he said, Jesus Christ, he said, you're a little girl when I left. You're not a little girl any longer. He was real glad to see me. And I was glad to see him too. Ken wasn't that way. He wasn't. He didn't have affection like Jim did. He wasn't affectionate. Jim was. To me anyway, he was.
Proper identification is required. State law restricts who may obtain a certified copy. Proper form of identification is required to process this request. All forms
What's that
of
like?
identification must show your current name and address.